Hey, I'm Ziggy. I'm an environmental engineer by profession and an amateur naturalist and environmentalist and many other things in a long convoluted life. But I hope you like this video. If you do, please like and subscribe and share with a friend or two. Thanks. Okay, I want to talk a little bit today. This is also more of a rant about modeling and its limitations. There's a lot of talk about modeling now as far as the coronavirus numbers. My experience is obviously more with stuff that has to do with hydrology. Models in general are only as good as what goes into them. And models and modelers are related almost to the point where a modeler puts a lot of time and effort into a model. It's like their child. They don't like their models being criticized. And a lot of the time, one of the problems is just they go way too far down the rabbit hole. A lot of time and effort on perfecting a model, because you can take your math out to infinity as far as the precision, but you can only be as precise as the information you're putting in. Now, if the information you're putting in is only accurate to, say, half a decimal point, to the nearest 0.5 of a whole number, whatever that particular parameter is. If the modeler's taking it out 2 decimal places, to the hundredth, it's just way beyond the actual accuracy of that model. And sometimes, they'll stick by the number. This number's good. Well, it's only as good as the information that went into it. If the information was not that accurate, well, then the model cannot be that accurate, no matter how good the math is behind it or whatever. If the parameters that you have to put in, your infiltration rate, your rain gauge, whatever, you can only have a certain level of accuracy. And the other thing is just the general assumptions. If your assumptions are wrong, the model is going to give you the wrong answer. I've run into this locally here, and I'm not sure where they're getting some of their numbers from. I do a lot of stormwater work, and I've seen people say that they got different numbers because they're using a different method, and their method is more accurate or whatever as far as infiltration and runoff, and there's different methods. This particular person was using something called the green and amped method, which is supposed to be more fine-tuned to that initial bit of infiltration when the soil is dry compared to as it slowly becomes more saturated. But in general, if you're, compared to rational method, TR55 method, SWIM, all these other different methods of calculating runoff, if you're using the same assumptions, you're going to be in the same ballpark. If you're saying you've got a loose sandy soil and you got a ton of infiltration, well, the amount of infiltration versus the amount of runoff generated should be in the same ballpark regardless of what model you're using. Some of them are going to be more accurate or less accurate in certain applications. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, but whatever method you are using, it should be in the same ballpark. And if you're in a heavy clay soil, less infiltration, more runoff. If you're making that assumption, you should also be in the same ballpark across all your different modeling methods, all your different ways of computing that. They should all put you in the same ballpark. And a bad assumption is going to put you in a false result there. You know, it's just, you've got to make sure the homework going into it is the key. The best models are the ones where you have the chance to, as they say, truth it in the field. Maybe you model the flow in a piping system, a sewer pipe, and then, you know, you've got rain gauges set up in the area, and you've got flow metering in a couple key points within the piping, and you see what the model predicts and what actually happens. And you can say, oh, well, you know, I assume the pipes had this much roughness in it, maybe they have that much roughness. And you can tweak your assumptions and kind of dial it in to where, you know, the model's never going to be exactly the same as your real data, but you can get to where it's pretty damn close and a good functional tool for predicting what will happen under certain scenarios. When you see what's happening in the real world when something happens, and you're saying, okay, when this much water goes in, this happens. When a little bit more water goes in, this happens. And when you kind of, you know, dial it in, they work wonderful. You don't always get that up front for stormwater design, though. A lot of times you're building something and you won't be able to really truth that model until after it's built. But yeah, just I think it's a problem that, you know, we get too reliant on these mathematical models, because, you know, we keep creating something and we tend to believe the model sometimes more than we believe reality, and we don't understand the limitations of the model. Properly used, great tool, but I think there's a little bit, I don't want to say too much belief in science, but in a way we kind of, you know, we gloss over the limitations of our knowledge. You know, it's like predicting the weather. You know, they've got models that do that, and some models are more accurate on one thing or more accurate on another thing. And sometimes, like you'll see with the hurricanes, they'll have, okay, we ran, you know, 3 different models, and, you know, they run from this scenario to that scenario, and they'll show you the range. A lot of times, you know, sometimes you'll see people trust their model more than they should. That's my biggest complaint with them. So, something to watch for. You know, if somebody tells you something, you know, well, we put this in this model, and you know, they give you this incredibly precise result, it's probably bullshit. Not so much that it should be in the ballpark if they're a competent modeler, but as I think they overemphasize the accuracy. They believe the accuracy of the model more than, you know, understanding those limitations of the inputs going into the model. That's kind of a problem across science and technology, is just people forget the limitations of their knowledge. We know an awful lot, but it still has limitations. You've got to understand those limitations. You know, it's one thing to say it's going to rain tomorrow. It's another thing to say it's going to rain at 2:36 p.m. exactly at this spot. You know, and that's what people seem to be wandering towards a little bit too much. We don't have that level of accuracy in the inputs that we're putting into the model. No matter how precise the model is, it can never exceed the precision of those inputs and the human element of those assumptions. So that's it for that one. Talk at you later. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Hopefully it made you think, and Please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and check out the video that should be appearing somewhere around me here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.